My wife, our 6-year-old daughter Emma, and I had always loved road trips. There was something special about driving for hours with no schedule, stopping at random diners, exploring small towns, and making memories together. That summer, we decided to drive from Ohio to Florida for a family vacation. The trip started perfectly. The weather was beautiful. Traffic was light. Emma spent most of the drive singing along to songs from her favorite movies. For the first 10 hours, everything felt normal. Then the sun started setting. And that's when things changed. We were still about 6 hours from our destination when a severe thunderstorm rolled across the highway. Rain hammered the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. Lightning flashed constantly across the sky. Cars began pulling off the interstate one after another. My wife suggested we stop for the night. I agreed immediately. About 20 minutes later, we found a small roadside motel just off the highway. The place looked old but functional. The neon sign flickered. Several parking lot lights were burned out. The office was nearly empty. Still, we were exhausted. We just needed somewhere safe to sleep. Or so we thought. The motel clerk was a middle-aged woman who barely looked up from her computer. She handed me a key card and pointed toward room 117. "Ground floor," she said. "Closest room to the office." At the time, that sounded reassuring. We unloaded our bags, settled in, and ordered pizza from a nearby restaurant. Emma fell asleep around 10. My wife was asleep shortly after. I stayed awake watching television. Around midnight, I decided to step outside for some fresh air. That's when I noticed them. 3 men standing across the parking lot. At first, nothing seemed unusual. People stay at motels all the time. But something about them immediately caught my attention. They weren't talking. They weren't smoking. They weren't looking at their phones. They were simply standing there, watching, and all 3 of them appeared to be staring directly at our room. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I looked away for a moment. When I looked back, they were still there, not moving, not speaking, just staring. I suddenly felt very uncomfortable. I went back inside and locked the door. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were waiting for someone. Maybe there was a perfectly normal explanation. Still, I checked the lock twice before going to bed. About an hour later, I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure what had disturbed me. The room was dark, silent, then I heard it. Footsteps. Outside our room, slow, deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone was walking back and forth on the sidewalk. I sat up immediately. The footsteps continued, back and forth, over and over. My heart began beating faster. I carefully moved toward the window. Part of me didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I slowly pulled back the curtain and froze. One of the men was standing outside, less than 10 feet away, facing our window, watching the room. The moment I saw him, I dropped the curtain. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. I woke my wife immediately. At first, she thought I was being paranoid. Then she peeked through the curtain herself. Her expression changed instantly. She had seen him too. Neither of us slept after that. Around 2 a.m., the footsteps stopped. For a while, everything became quiet. Too quiet. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Not on the door, on the window. Knock, knock, knock. Emma stirred in her sleep. My wife grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. Another knock followed, this time louder. I wanted to look. I really did. But fear rooted me in place. Instead, I called the front desk. No answer. I called again. Nothing. The office phone rang endlessly. Nobody picked up. That terrified me even more. The office should have been staffed all night. So where was the clerk? And why wasn't she answering? 10 minutes later, headlights entered the parking lot. A pickup truck. Relief washed over me. Until it parked beside the 3 men, The driver stepped out. The men approached him. The four of them spoke briefly. Then all four looked toward room 117, our room. I felt sick. My wife saw it too. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. We were thinking the exact same thing. Something wasn't right. And somehow, we had become the center of their attention. I decided to call the police. Not because a crime had happened, not because anyone had threatened us, but because every instinct told me we were in danger. The dispatcher listened carefully. She asked several questions. Then she said something surprising. A patrol car was already nearby and would stop by. Hearing that helped. A little. The officer arrived roughly 20 minutes later. As soon as his patrol car entered the lot, the men disappeared. Just like that. Gone, the officer searched the property. He checked behind the building, near the dumpsters, along the tree line. Nothing. The men had vanished. The officer spoke with us for a few minutes. He couldn't do much since no laws had been broken. Still, he agreed the situation sounded suspicious. Before leaving, he suggested we move to a hotel in the morning. That was already our plan. By 4 a.m., things seemed calm again. The parking lot was empty. No footsteps, no knocking, nothing. Eventually, exhaustion got the better of us. We fell asleep. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. A loud metallic sound jolted me awake. Clang, clang, clang. The noise seemed to be coming from outside the room. I looked through the peephole and immediately felt my blood run cold. Someone was standing beside my car. One of the three men. He wasn't breaking into it. He wasn't touching it. He was simply standing there, looking inside, almost studying it. Then he slowly walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I checked the time. 5:07 a.m. Sunrise was still nearly an hour away. Those 50 minutes felt like an entire day. The second daylight appeared, we packed everything. I didn't even wait for breakfast. I loaded our bags into the car while my wife stayed inside with Emma. Every shadow made me nervous. Every movement caught my attention. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. Then I noticed something strange. A folded piece of paper tucked under one of my windshield wipers. My stomach dropped. I unfolded it carefully. There was no message, no writing, no threat, just a crude drawing, a rectangle, with the number 117 written inside. Room 117, our room. I looked around the parking lot. Nobody was there. The men were gone. But somehow that piece of paper felt more disturbing than anything that had happened during the night, because it meant someone wanted us to know they'd been paying attention. I immediately drove to the office. The same clerk from the previous evening was sitting behind the desk. I showed her the paper. The moment she saw it, her face changed. Not fear, recognition. She knew something. I could tell. After several seconds of silence, she finally spoke quickly. "You're not the first guest to report those men." A chill ran through me. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then explained. Over the previous year, multiple guests had complained about 3 men lingering around the property late at night. The descriptions were always similar. 3 men. Watching rooms, appearing suddenly, disappearing before police arrived. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew where they came from. And nobody had ever managed to identify them. The complaints had become so frequent that management had installed additional cameras. Yet strangely, the footage rarely showed anything useful. Sometimes the men appeared. Sometimes they didn't, even when witnesses swore they had seen them. I didn't know whether to believe her. Honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. We left immediately afterward. For several hours, the drive felt normal again. The sun was shining. Emma was laughing. The nightmare seemed behind us. Then we stopped for gas. While filling the tank, I glanced toward the far side of the parking lot. My heart nearly stopped. A dark pickup truck sat near the road. The same truck that had arrived at the motel during the night. At least it looked identical. I couldn't be completely sure, but it felt like the same one. A man sat behind the wheel, watching. The moment he noticed me staring, he drove away. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. Either way, I got back into the car immediately. Years have passed since that trip. I've never seen those men again. I've never returned to that motel. And I've never found out what they wanted. Maybe they were criminals looking for easy targets. Maybe they were involved in something illegal. Maybe they simply enjoyed terrifying travelers. I honestly don't know. But every now and then, I think about that folded piece of paper, the rectangle, the number 117, no explanation, no message. Just proof that somebody had been watching us all night. And sometimes, the things you can't explain are far more frightening than the things you can. Because even now, years later, one question still keeps me awake at night. If the police scared them away, who left the paper on my car afterward?